I'm Brandon Amoroso, and this is the D2Z podcast, building and growing your business from a Gen Z perspective. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to D2Z, a podcast about using the Gen Z mindset to grow your business. I'm Gen Z entrepreneur Brandon Amoroso, founder and president of retention as a service agency, Electric. And before we jump into the show today, I just want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Gorgeous, the number one Shopify customer support platform, helping brands like Brewmate and 11,000 more turn their customer support into a profit center. So elevate your customer experience, increase retention, and boost efficiency with Gorgeous's omni-channel help desk. And you can book a demo on gorgeous.com and mention the D2Z podcast to get your second and third months free. And that's about it. Well, today I am joined by Sethi, mid-market account executive at Shopify Plus, who we've been working with pretty closely over the last few months here on some pretty exciting deals. So I'm really excited to have you on the show.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Before we jump into all the topics that we want to cover today, is there, can you just give everybody just like a quick background and an intro on yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Brandon, appreciate you for having me. This is my first podcast, so a little nervous, but I'm very excited. I am Jay. I'm based out of New York City. I've been at Shopify for a little over a year, and I support the mid-market segment, specifically for Shopify Plus. And prior to Shopify, I was at Box, a cloud content management company. Went to school at UCLA and got started with my e-commerce kind of journey back in 2017 with some early subscription clothing brands before it became kind of household to have subscriptions everywhere. But yeah, that's just a quick little bit about me.
What drew you to Ecom?
It was kind of like serendipitous. It stumbled into it because my cousin at the time was working at this company called 5-4 Clothing. And I think they changed their name. They're doing something else now, but at the time it was, a way for me to get free clothes. I went to UCLA. I was in college. I didn't have much money, and it was just a way for me to, look cool. And so that's kind of what got me into it. And then eventually kind of got to learn a little bit more about, this is at the time where Facebook marketing was kind of like at the peak, and everyone is doing all of their kind of retargeting through that. And just kind of got to see the world of how products move. And that was really interesting. And I've always wanted to come back and get more involved on the merchant side of things. And so when the Shopify opportunity came up, it was a no-brainer for me.
I missed, unfortunately or fortunately, the Facebook heydays of e-commerce. It would have been pretty nice, I feel like 2013, 2014, just roll out any product and just start spending some money, and
it's pretty crazy,
and
right?
On your way.
Yeah.
What are in your conversations with merchants in the sales process? How much of that comes up? This sort of new environment that they're having to navigate when it comes to customer acquisition. Is that something that is prompting their desire to take a look at Shopify? Is it a big component of what they're trying to address, or is it more secondary?
That's a good question. I feel like it depends, right? There's so many different types of companies that come to evaluate Shopify because of kind of the breadth of what Shopify can now do. We have, our like direct to consumer, like e-commerce, more traditional e-commerce business. And then we have, the wholesale B2B businesses, and they all have, different requirements. But I think for all merchants, it is something always top of mind. How do we get traffic onto the site? How do we boost sales? And I think Shopify's also done a really good job of being able to meet merchants with products that they need in a pretty timely manner. So like Shopify Audiences, for example, to help improve return on ad spend with all the changes that happened with iOS update now, year and a half ago. I mean, we talk to merchants together all the time, and they look at you to provide that kind of guidance around how to improve traffic, how to improve site navigation, how to avoid, users that are, you spend your hard earned money getting to your site from dropping off because your navigation sucks. Like we go through those, conversations all the time.
Yeah. What are some of the trends that you're seeing just overall since COVID has sort of fizzled out a little bit and there's been a return to retail? And I know, at least through like the Shopify editions reports that I've been digging through and putting together my own analyses on, it seems like there's heavy investment going into the retail experience and having that integrated commerce experience for customers. What are some of the trends that you're seeing in your sales process?
Yeah, I can speak to some of the trends that I'm seeing in my kind of like specific segment. So the segment that I support are merchants that are doing under 20 million online GMV. Offline, can be pretty flexible. You can go up to a few hundred million. So
Okay.
within that kind of like bucket of merchants that I support, a lot of the big trends are around merchants trying to simplify their tech stack. So they're trying to use, you know, less apps, less, custom built solutions that require dev teams to manage. Um,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of merchants I'm working with are also trying to figure out if they're only direct to consumer. They're trying to figure out how do we do B2B. If they're solely B2B, they're trying to figure out how do we automate some of our B2B requirements so our sales reps aren't as busy taking orders. What orders can we automate to an e-commerce solution like Shopify? And then I think it's interesting. They're effectively trying to create a more like direct to consumer experience for the B2B buyers. I think that's kind of been an interesting trend to see, and an amazing product that I get to sell because it's timely. It's what merchants are thinking about, and again, ultimately, it's what the merchants' customers are asking for.
Yeah, the B2B side of things is pretty interesting. And I would say most of the deals that we're actually working on right now with Shopify are on the B2B side. And they are really focused on pretty much the ask is, can you just sort of build us an experience that is kind of like the same experience that we get when we go to a regular D2C website? Um, and so it's fun to get to expand outside of our like usual box of I feel like there's some verticals that Shopify just like sort of owns outright. And all those deals we've already sort of worked through, whether it's like skincare and beauty or like shoe companies or like coffee brands. And they're almost too cookie cutter for me at this point. I really like getting to dive into some of these new things like B2B. It's small, but even the ability to, well, if customers don't want to pay with credit cards, what does that experience look like now leveraging Shopify? And so there's these little things that we now get to uncover and tackle that we didn't get to before, which makes things a little bit interesting.
100%. Yeah. I also think the experience and expertise you bring on the direct to consumer side is valuable, right? Like B2B companies are also assuming that they're able to, like we've, I think, run into a few circumstances where they're like, we can't venture into direct to consumer because like
Yeah.
the retailers will retaliate against us. Like those are examples where like they're probably not going to go into D2C, but for the ones that, have a product that can be potentially successful direct to consumer, I think it's interesting for you to bring your expertise of, hey, you can set up your B2B this way. And also for products, that you're manufacturing sometimes, this is how we can go direct to consumer. So maybe you can find additional revenue streams.
Yeah, I think the sort of the sweet spot in a year or two will be the businesses that can conduct like D2C, B2B, and their retail presence all through Shopify's platform to actually have those integrated customer experiences that I think a lot of companies and brands want to talk about or say that's what they're trying to accomplish, but more often than not, that isn't the reality. I think the e-commerce versus POS side of things is where I see the biggest gap. I mean, there's so many times where the e-commerce engine is not communicating in any way whatsoever with the POS, and so you run into issues where hey, I want to buy online, but then maybe I want to return in store,
Yeah.
or maybe I bought in store, but then this is not the same. Whereas I don't know if they still use it, but when I went to the marine layer back when I was living in San Diego, they were using Shopify POS at the time. And it was just so easy because I placed a bunch of orders for Black Friday, Cyber Monday, um, all obviously on their ecom platform, which was Shopify. Got some stuff that didn't fit, and I just went to the mall like a couple days later and got to exchange it and actually interact with the store person. And they knew my order
Yeah.
history. They saw my loyalty points. It was sort of like, oh wow, like this is what it could be like. And sure, there's a lot of other things that have to come before every merchant can be utilizing that, because some businesses are a little bit more simple from an operational standpoint than others. But I was like, oh wow, like this is really actually what the customer experience should be like.
Yeah. I think it's like a totally, I've been going through a few conversations with merchants that are in, like, have multiple physical retail locations, also have online operations. And it's interesting to understand the differences in how these businesses also operate. Like, you can probably look at them as standalone businesses. Um, but to get to marry them, create an amazing customer experience, buy something online, return it in person, you know,
Yeah.
it's a convenience factor where you're able to meet your customers wherever they are.
I actually saw, or I've experienced companies where quite literally the ecom team goals are not complementary to the retail goals. Like it's sort of seen as a winner takes all
Mm,
approach, and you see this actually a lot with the alcohol industry, where a sale is not a sale. So like you could have a rep in a particular territory, and if the sales are going direct to consumer to customers in that territory, they don't get any credit for it. So they actually would prefer that everybody just is forced to go into the retail shop and purchase within that location, because that's what they're going to be credited towards, and
yeah.
that's what their bonuses are based on. And so then you end up in this issue where like people's money and livelihood are really at stake, because the organizations that are employing them have not been able to sort of think through or roll out structures that just are beneficial to the business as a whole.
Mm,
Because 10, 15 years ago, maybe that made sense where they were siloed, but now commerce is completely changed, and it really is an experience that touches so many different areas. So I think the businesses that are going to be able to be successful long term are going to figure out how to balance that.
oh, 100%.
Where
I think the wine you bring up, like the wine conversation or kind of like industry you bring up, is interesting too, because they also have tastings. There's, like, you might taste something in store, think about it, mull over it. That was the first time you were exposed to it, but you buy it online. And so, like, you don't know at which touch point that the customer interacts with, they've decided to buy. You also don't know when they make that decision to buy, whether they're going to buy it from the medium that they were introduced to the product, or on a separate medium, whether it's, online, or maybe they're like, they own a bunch of grocery stores and they're going to buy it for their retail
yeah,
location. Like, you really don't know. Um, yeah, it's definitely an interesting kind of point.
I think the craziest thing to me is, and this is sort of an aside and not really related to the POS side of things, but there's still so many businesses that are doing, because I thought, oh, like that Shopify must have like 100% of the market when it comes to e-commerce penetration, but that's actually not the case. I think like WooCommerce is still the largest, like actually by a sizable amount. I'm like, why? Like WooCommerce is not, like, I've used it before. It's not SMB friendly. What is the deal here? But there's still so much opportunity out there. It's just not like it's not the sexiest industries anymore. Like all the deals that we've been working thus far are those that are um, a little bit more antiquated.
Hmm.
So we're working on a jewelry deal right now. They have literally an ERP that is no longer in business, but like that's the ERP for the jewelry industry. Like, how the hell are we even supposed to integrate this with Shopify if it's not even in business anymore? Um, then you have companies obviously in the alcohol space, which is one that is accelerating pretty quickly actually when it comes to like digital innovation for the first time. But then we're working on like gardening and fertilizer companies. We're working on these industries that aren't as I don't know, for lack of a better term, they're just not as sexy as like a skincare and beauty brand, or like there's no celebrity except an alcohol case, because every celebrity has an alcohol brand, but there's no celebrity coming in and being like, oh yeah, I want a gardening tool company.
Like these
And
fertilizers. Yeah.
that could be pretty cool though. Maybe I'll have to reach out to LeBron or somebody and ask him if he wants to start a fertilizer company.
Never know. He probably has a huge lawn. Probably a ton of flowers he cares deeply about.
I don't want to speak for him, but my guess would be that he has never taken care of that lawn by himself before.
Yeah, I can see that.
But I think that's where a lot of the opportunity is today. And when I've been talking with other Shopify Plus agency owners, they are seeing that as well. And as Shopify stores shifts its sites into new verticals, the agencies are following suit, and there's a lot of low-hanging fruit there to help businesses modernize their tech stack. They're not all billion-dollar plus companies, but there are sizable ones there as well.
As you have these conversations too, we're talking about a bunch of different industries, right? For you as an agency trying to position yourself as an expert, that positioning, does it become challenging for you? Do you kind of just take a step back and you go, hey, it's all e-commerce. We can all, like, there are kind of similarities that we can apply to your business. Like, I'm curious, how do you think about that?
Well, there's actually there's a lot of value in being super deep in a particular vertical for sure. But for us, at the end of the day, it just comes down to Shopify. So like, if you're not going to be using Shopify, then we're not going to work with you. That's sort of the stake that we put into the ground. And then when it comes to Shopify, like, we're not going to do ads for you. We're not going to do influencer marketing. We're solely focused on customer experience and retention. So what that looks like in terms of like services that are easy to think about would be web design and development and email and SMS marketing. And then there's a whole bunch of other stuff that goes into it, and more like Shopify tech stack consulting and architecting retention programs. But at the end of the day, it's web design development and email and SMS marketing. So that's more so our messaging. Our messaging isn't necessarily as much around verticals. Now, we do have like an alcohol specific one pager,
right?
And we have more clients there, but that's more of a sales function than it is necessarily like internal. We somehow have this like secret sauce, and there are pros to it for sure. So like internally within our team, we'll have certain team members who maybe work more on the skincare and beauty side than they do on the alcohol side. That's either because that they enjoy it more, or because they ended up just taking on more clients in that particular vertical. But we actually had a really interesting one come in a couple of weeks ago. CBD business, only B2B, going to be launching on Shopify Plus. And the Drinks app, which supports state SKU compliance requirements for alcohol products, is actually what they need to be able to support what they need to do from a CBD and I believe it's Delta 8 standpoint for their B2B business. And so there's this really interesting and cool stuff that comes up all the time like that. I mean, that's actually the most like that's the crazy example I've seen, where like quite literally we're going to be able to spin off a little different variation to be able to support them of the Drinks app. But all the time there's parallels across industries where you're able to sort of take something from another and bring it into one. And especially when you're dealing with industries that are more antiquated, like we use CPG brands all the time to think about how we want to architect an online wine program. I mean, why would you not look towards the industries that are more mature when it comes to e-commerce when you're thinking about building out your own?
Yeah.
So that was sort of a long-winded answer to say verticals matter, but at the end of the day, there's a lot that you can get out of one another and translate over.
Yeah. And I guess also, instead of like specific verticals you're targeting, your niche has become Shopify, and that, the product knowledge and expertise there is valuable.
Yeah. And there's industries where verticalization is more important than others. Like alcohol for sure is one where the barriers to entry are high, because there's so much just inside baseball talk and actual rules and regulations that will legitimately prevent you from doing certain things on the internet when it comes to selling that you just don't have to deal with in other industries. So same could be said for CBD as well.
CBD, tobacco. Just all kind of regulated
having that
spaces.
vertical experience. Yeah, exactly.
I hear that.
Do you, when you're going through the sales process, are you touching all verticals, and it's primarily based off of those GMV bands?
Yeah. So in our segment, it's pretty much all verticals. And as you move up segment, they get a little more strategic. So you'll have your teams that just support kind of beauty and health. And it kind of like they specialize a little bit more.
Got it.
But I think that's the coolest thing about being in this space. Sorry to cut you off, but like the the different businesses you get to see, the advantage of being on, like the sales side on the Shopify side is the merchants are coming to you because they're trying to improve their business. So one, you get to understand, where does the business sit today? That's one of the things I think I enjoy the most, like learning about how they got started, what their operations look like what their growth goals are. And then eventually you get to talk a little bit about what the product Shopify can do. We get to bring in agencies like you that have, a real expertise in getting them to where their goals are. And it's also epic to watch them launch. 3-6 months down the line, you're seeing their site go live on Shopify. And you want nothing more than just like the most success for these merchants who hopefully, you put them on the right path and they're building on Shopify, a company that's going to be around for the next 100 years. And hopefully that translates to a better experience for their end customer too.
I love sales for that exact reason. The ability to get to dig in, and you're constantly presented with new challenges, and executing is important as well. But I find much more excitement in the actual sales process itself than necessarily the delivery side of things, which is why we have a team at the agency so that I can empower them to execute, and then I'll go back on the sales road.
I always appreciate seeing your face on our early sales cycles. It's a familiar, nice face to see, and I think we're consistently getting into the groove of like a good partnership, which is always really important for the merchant experience too.
Yeah. What's it like the sales to actual launch handoff? And the reason I ask is because as we grew pretty quickly at Electric, that like the sales and enablement team actually used to be one and the same. I mean, it was
really?
5 of us.
So you guys would sell the product. I mean, obviously you guys have 5 people, and then you have to go and implement it.
Exactly. But as we got to like 40, 50 people, then it's you start to get more siloed in terms of teams and specialization, which makes sense. But then we had some gaps when it came to handoff, because I might be out there selling, I don't know, the Ferrari, but then the team is like based off of the scope and what's actually in the deliverables. They're like, okay, well, we're actually, I don't know, we're going to build a BMW. And then the client's like, well, what the hell? Like, Brandon talked about all these things and these ideas, and like, yeah, well, that's not actually what is in the scope of work. And so I had to do a better job of actually sort of documenting what was discussed, what was talked about, and then aligning with the client on like, hey, even this is like a great idea, but it's going to cost you too much money. And so this is something that maybe we can focus on later on down the line, because I wasn't setting up our execution team for success because I was out there selling things that they weren't even aware of. So that was sort of an evolution and learning process for us, for sure.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point you bring up. I think it's a struggle all sales teams, I'm sure, deal with. We have quotas we have to hit, and we obviously want to overachieve on our numbers. But I think the thing that Shopify has been able to set up, and I think this is a lot of credit goes to like the launch team. I'm sure there's like a lot of operational teams involved that are working behind the scenes that aren't even recognized, but just setting up processes so that there's clear rules around what documentation you need before knowledge transfer. So like before we even get to submit a launch case, there's like a pretty extensive list of documentation that we have to put together. Then we set up a kind of kickoff meeting internally to Shopify with the launch team to give them context on, hey, this is the deal. This is what, potential bottlenecks could be. These are the different stakeholders. This is the agency that's going to be supporting the build. And, you send a introduction email, and at any point you get looped back in, you're ready to re-engage and kind of figure things out. But yeah, I think kind of documentation was the biggest part. Just documentation also early in the sales cycle. Because also you forget, like, it's a 4 or 5 month sales cycle. Like, I can't remember what I ate last week. Like, how am I going to remember conversations I had 5 months ago?
That's what Instagram is for.
That's what my reels are for. I'm the worst social media poster ever too. I post like 4 times a year. It's just
those 4 times everybody's like waiting on the edge of their seat for it.
This is what people tell me. They're like, Jay, you're not posting yet. Yeah. That's the other. Sorry, I was going to totally jump to another tangent, so I'll let you finish your thought.
No, go. I was just going to keep talking about Instagram and food, but you go for it. What's
No,
the tangent?
I was going to go into, so like, I obviously see you're active on LinkedIn. You have your newsletter. Like, I think that's so amazing that you're able to get your brand out in a way where you're giving people content that they care about. So that's something that I've told myself I would do, that I haven't quite got around to. But like, even for like editions, right? Like, I read your releases along with the documentation I'm getting from Shopify to go, all right, like, what's Brandon's perspective on it? What is he seeing? You make it like a few bullet points. I'm not doing too much reading too, so it's really helpful. But where this is going is, I'm curious, like, what sort of thought do you put into creating content, even as far as it goes, like this podcast, you have another one coming out. Yeah, like, what are your approaches to it?
So for me, and I feel like, yeah, we do a lot of content, but there's still so much more we could be doing. And so there's a lot sort of in the pipeline that I'll talk about in a little bit here. But for me, it was just establishing the framework and the consistency and building in almost internal sort of checks and balances, so that you're not just sort of starting and stopping on things. So for me, the newsletter, there's a process. It's literally baked into my life now. And so if there's a newsletter that doesn't go out on a Sunday, like, something terribly has gone wrong that week. Because throughout the week, I'm thinking of, oh, what am I going to want to be highlighting in this section this weekend, and this and that. And it's also a opportunity for me to see what's out there and then help the agency internalize it. I'm actually working on a book that's just about done. That sort of goes through the evolution of electric, and then all the things that I learned, primarily all the shit that I messed up, but things that I would have wished I had known starting it again. And one of the biggest unlocks for us was me starting that newsletter and then bringing in Elisa, who's our VP, because I was far too like day to day. Like, I was just, I couldn't look out into the ecosystem and see, oh, here are all the updates from Klaviyo. Here's all the updates from Shopify. Here are all the updates from Recharge. And then think about and do analyses like you've read, where, okay, great, here's all these product updates, but what does it actually mean for our clients? And like, how can we leverage it to produce returns? Now, with the newsletter, I can focus on that, but then Elisa takes it and operationalizes it within the agency. So as an agency, we're actually far more advanced than we ever have been, because I'm out there looking for what's new, what we can leverage for our clients. And then I have a team that helps actually push it through the org and operationalize it. So the content serves more than just like thought leadership and inbound. Like, it quite literally is it's driving some of the things that we're doing on a daily basis at Electric. And then as it relates to the podcast, again, just building out the framework. Once you have that framework, it's pretty easy to rinse and repeat. So that was why it was actually so painful for me to get off, like, the first 59 episodes we did on Zoom. And like, we had that sort of cycle in motion. But for the last 2 weeks, we've been working out, like, okay, now we've got the mic. Now we've got this special camera. Now we got to work on the lighting, and there's going to be all these tweaks coming up. And so once we finally get that in a good place, it's just rinse and repeat. And your content doesn't just die there. Half of my LinkedIn posts are from other pieces of content that I've done in the past. content I post on LinkedIn that can turn into a YouTube video. A YouTube video can be sliced up into a bunch of different assets for social. So people say to me all the time, like, oh, wow, you're posting so much. And it's like, how do you have the time for that? It's just being smart about the content creation, and more so the content, what's the word? I don't know why I'm blanking on this, but there we go. The content repurposing.
Mm.
So that Shopify Editions analyses, I think it was like 10, 12 pages. That is 30 LinkedIn posts. That's 60 TikToks. It's like, that's how I think of it. Start with the long form content, and then everything else trickles down.
That's really smart. Basically, the newsletter fuels the rest of your content.
Pretty much, yeah. Because at the end of the day, you can't just, and I don't write my own LinkedIn posts as an example. I'm doing the newsletter from scratch by myself. And then that fuels ideas for the rest of the team to be able to slice and dice that into like social assets and things like that.
Mm.
But if I didn't provide them with that, what are they're just going to create from thin air? That just wouldn't work. So there has to be buy-in from both sides, and
a strong team to support it.
Yeah, and the team is really helpful in ideation as well. Which I don't know about you, but for me, the biggest bottleneck ever is like the ideation.
Mm.
It's less about sitting down and like grinding through something. It's more about what the hell do I actually want to talk about. So I've started to experiment a little bit with like using some of this Chat GPT, Bard, whatever tool it is, to spark ideas. Like, hey, what should I write about? What's hot and trending in Ecom this week? And then take that and then go put some thoughts and analyses around it.
Yeah, I mean, you can even probably take it to the extent of you copy paste your newsletter into ChatGPT and you go, hey, create 10 posts for me that I can use over the next week in like, bite-sized bits under X number of words. Just let it ride.
There was 100% chance that I'm going to try that this weekend, and I will let you know which of my next LinkedIn posts is purely AI written versus anything from me.
Yeah, you will have to let me know, because there's no shot I'm the one to figure that one out. It's so good. It's so good, even for like, yeah, it's impressive.
Have you started leveraging AI at all in your like sales process or in your daily work life?
I use it for more like questions that I have, or that questions I field from merchants. So Shopify has like a internal chat GPT that has all of, I guess, like help documentation. I think there's some other content there that it's managed to ingest. But it's great for when I'm trying to set up a demo for a customer and I have questions about how to create meta fields because I'm running into issues with it. Like, it just kind of spits it back out to me and goes, hey, have you done this? And then I'm trying to troubleshoot. I'm like, hey, I did step this X, Y, and Z, but why am I not getting a response for this? So that's how I'm using it for kind of my day to day. And then there's this, I forgot what it was called. Here, I can pull up the link. It's called learnprompting.org. I've been just like playing around with it. Like, you can get pretty complex.
Learnprompting.org.
Yeah, check it out.
Learnprompting.org.
And it basically like starts off at very basic, like, here's how a basic application of like prompting goes. And then there's like intermediate level, and then there's like advanced prompting. And so you're like, you're just like you're learning how to ask questions, which is, I guess, half the battle with chat.
Yeah. Well, I uncovered last week, like ChatGPT only has historical data up until like maybe mid 2021 or something. Because I did an analysis on Shopify's earnings report, and I was like, well, let me just see if ChatGPT can analyze this for me instead. And I was like, no, I can only go up until like mid 2021. But apparently, Bard, which is like Google's chat competitor, has a real-time access to the internet and all of Google's search results. So it can do things like that. So it's all these things that I'm uncovering. And we got a product that we just kicked off the safe fundraising process for, that my brother and I have been working on for about the last year and a half. And there's so many applications for how we can use LLMs to sort of take data and essentially standardize it so that the algorithm can actually then take that and use it. There's just
what's a safe?
there's a
You
lot
said
of
you said
crazy
it's
stuff
safe
going on.
fundraising. Is it safe raising?
It's we're raising money, but it's just we're doing a safe round. So as opposed to like doing a priced round. So
Okay.
the safe raise is essentially you're getting money from the investors, and when you go and raise the priced round, that safe raise then converts into equity. And because you're giving the money during the safe round, there's usually some sort of a discount or a cap on the valuation, and so there's upside for these investors at this
That are
stage.
coming in early. Got it.
Yeah, but it's early enough where a priced round would be like very premature. It's sort of you're using this money to get it to the stage where your priced round will be significantly higher than what you'd be able to do if you didn't go and raise the safe round.
Are you able to share what the project is that you guys are working on?
Yeah, so it's all out of the issues that we both had when it came to hiring and finding jobs. That was sort of the impetus. Like hiring at Electric, after we got past like 20 employees, when the referral pool ran out, it just became a nightmare. Post a job on LinkedIn looking for a Shopify developer, pay LinkedIn like $5-10 grand to promote the post. I get 500 applicants. Maybe 5 of them had ever even logged into Shopify before. Like, okay, awesome. Guess we'll try to do something else here. And then
that's
on his
$1,000
end,
per applicant. That's wild.
yep. And they were all terrible too. I mean, we maybe hired like one developer off of Shopify, then, or not off of Shopify, off of LinkedIn or one of these job boards. Then on the other hand, you have him. When he was at school, he just graduated this past March. But when he was at school looking for internships, he's getting emails from like Indeed and ZipRecruiter to go apply to be the chief marketing officer of Disney. Like, no offense to him, but you're
think
not
he's ready?
qualified to be the chief marketing officer of Disney, and you don't need a rocket scientist to tell you that either. So we're like, okay, well, why is this the case? Why are these algorithms so terrible? And the reason why the algorithms are so terrible is because they're just based off of your one-page resume. They're all trying to scrape keywords off of these resumes, filter them into algorithms to then provide recommendations. So that was this problem that we sort of set out to address. And the way that we're able to address it is actually in the applicant tracking system market. So ATS systems like a Lever, a Greenhouse. One of the core issues that we identified in the market right now is that ATS systems and job boards are completely separate. There's no feedback loop. So, for example, if I'm a ZipRecruiter or an Indeed and I push applicants over to, let's say, Shopify, there's no feedback loop in terms of, are these applicants even good? Are they being hired? There's no continuity of data sharing between the systems. And so what we've basically built is an applicant tracking system that has a job board as well. And so for us, our path to market is get companies to use the ATS, which is very low priced, because that's not the monetization opportunity. The monetization opportunity is on the job board side. So we essentially have an ATS that has capabilities that are only possible because it has an attached job board. And then let's say Shopify uses it as their ATS. Well, every job seeker that comes through as an applicant now has a scaleless profile. And so one company for us could be anywhere between 1,000 to 10,000 plus new job seekers on the platform. So it creates this flywheel that just feeds data into our algorithm that is going to basically solve our initial problem, which was, why are the recommendations so terrible? So there's a whole lot sort of in that, but that's the TLDR for the most part. I actually have him coming on the show next week to chat more through it, but I'm super excited about that one. We've been working on it for a while now.
That's awesome. So it's like a proper feedback loop. I'm excited to listen in on that conversation.
We'll see how things go. It's my first foray into the fundraising side of things because Electric was bootstrapped. So it's fun for me too, because I'm getting to learn. And I mean, there's always nuances, the little things like raising a safe. It's really only done if you're a C Corp, but we don't want to be a C Corp yet because of the QSBS treatment. And we want to extend our runway before we do a conversion to the C Corp. So I find these things interesting. Maybe other people are like, you're crazy. I don't know why you'd find that interesting, but it's fun to be able to get to learn again and to roll up your sleeves and dig into something.
That's amazing. Yeah, I wish you and your brother the best of luck. That's also exciting to work with your sibling, right? That's always, I imagine that's got to be fun.
There's definitely pros and cons. And when I get a text from my mom, like, oh, why haven't you replied to Parker in a couple of days? He's looking for you for some work thing. And I'm like, yeah, this is not going to work for me.
Oh, that's so good. Your mom's playing middleman. I love to see that.
Yes. She's always got her hands to something. She actually worked at Electric for a while. She was like our pseudo HR person.
No way.
Keep it in a family business. Used her maiden name because we didn't want anybody to know that we were related and we were remote, so it didn't matter. But eventually it came out. It was pretty funny.
You visit home for Thanksgiving, the background just happens to look almost identical.
Exactly. That's why we got those Zoom filters now.
100%.
Well, I know we're running up on time here. Thank you so much for coming on. Are there any sort of last tips that you want to give for other people in their own sales processes that you think would be relevant, or just general macro trends that you want to call out? Really anything that you want to leave everybody with?
Yeah, I mean, one, I appreciate this opportunity to kind of get on this podcast. This was my first one. Not as scary as I thought it was. Very enjoyable. So I appreciate it.
I'm very scary.
You never know, right? It's like maybe podcast Brandon's different from sales call Brandon.
Yeah.
So I can confirm sales call Brandon, podcast Brandon, doing the same. The only takeaway would be, enjoy kind of whatever early process, you're going through as you're going through kind of the startup fundraising. That's obviously a really intriguing process for us. We talk about our early sales process and the discovery. And, for anyone trying to get into a sales career, just enjoy the discovery process and kind of learn from everyone around you, ask questions, and reach out to me on LinkedIn if I can be a resource or useful to anyone listening to this podcast. But otherwise, Brandon, I appreciate you having me on, man.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. Do you want to let everybody know where they can find you online before we hop?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn at Sethi. You can find me on Instagram at Japa Indo. I'm half Japanese, half Indian, so this is put together at high school. I thought it was the smartest handle ever, and just haven't changed it since.
If I told you what my Xbox gamer tag was when I was 6 years old, you would have a lot of questions. So we'll leave that for another episode. But I can relate to creating a username that doesn't necessarily have staying power.
No, it's just we're just gonna ride this one out. Yeah, and you can see my once every quarterly post, and that's what you come to my Instagram for.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Everybody listening, as always, this is Brandon Amoroso. You can find me at brandonamoroso.com or electricmarketing.com. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next time.